Have you ever looked at your bank account after years of trying to save money and felt like you were running on a treadmill that never moved? Maybe you've managed to scrape together $5,000, or perhaps you've been disciplined enough to accumulate 20 or 30,000. Either way, that dream of becoming wealthy feels like climbing Mount Everest barefoot. But what if the math of money worked completely differently than you imagine? What if I told you that reaching $100,000 means you've already conquered the hardest part of becoming a millionaire? By the way, my name is Tim, and this channel exists for one simple reason: to help normal people finally understand how money really works. If you want calm, simple explanations about saving, investing, and building wealth over time, hit subscribe to Tim Invests so you don't miss the rest of this series. Most people think wealth building works like filling a bathtub with a leaky faucet. You pour in $1, you get $1 closer to your goal. Save 10,000, you're 10,000 closer to $1 million. This seems logical, but it's actually the exact opposite of how money grows when you invest it properly. This misunderstanding keeps millions of people trapped in financial mediocrity, watching their modest savings accounts and wondering why they never seem to make meaningful progress. The truth about building wealth isn't just counterintuitive, it's almost magical when you understand how it actually works. Your money doesn't just sit there waiting for you to add more to the pile. Instead, it becomes an army of workers, each dollar earning returns that create more dollars, which then earn their own returns. This exponential growth means that your first $100,000 represents far more progress toward becoming a millionaire than simple arithmetic would suggest. Think about every wealthy person you've ever heard of. They didn't get rich by trading their time for money in a linear fashion. They understood something fundamental about how compound growth accelerates wealth creation over time. When you grasp this principle, everything changes about how you view money, spending, and the possibility of financial freedom. Let me show you exactly how this works using real numbers that might completely change your perspective on what's possible. Imagine you decide to invest $400 every month. That's roughly the cost of dining out a few times, your streaming subscriptions, and those impulse purchases you make without thinking. Nothing extravagant, but certainly not pocket change either, assuming your investments earn an average return of 8% annually, which is actually conservative compared to historical stock market performance. Here's where things get interesting. It takes approximately 12 years of consistent monthly contributions to reach your first $100,000. 12 years might sound like an eternity when you're just starting, but consider this. 12 years ago, you were a completely different person with different priorities, different knowledge, and different circumstances. Time passes regardless of whether you're building wealth or not. During those first 12 years, the majority of money accumulating in your account comes directly from your own contributions. You're essentially doing most of the heavy lifting while compound interest sits on the sidelines, slowly warming up. Out of that $100,000, roughly $62,000 comes from your monthly investments, while the remaining $38,000 represents pure growth from your money working for you. Here's where most people make a quiet but massive mistake. They look at those numbers, feel discouraged because the returns seem too small, and either stop or pull back right when the math is about to tilt in their favor. What they don't realize is that by the time you hit that first 100,000, you've already finished the hardest part of the entire journey. You've built the foundation that will support everything that comes next. Remember, we're trying to reach $1 million and you've just hit 100,000. Traditional thinking would suggest you're 1/10 of the way there, but compound interest doesn't operate according to traditional thinking. The reality is far more encouraging than that linear assumption. From this point forward, your money begins working substantially harder for you. Those investment returns that seemed modest during the first 12 years start to snowball in ways that will genuinely surprise you. The next milestone is $200,000, and here's the part that will challenge everything you thought you knew about wealth building. It only takes about 6 more years to reach that second 100,000. Let me repeat that because it's crucial to understand. It took 12 years to accumulate your first $100,000, but only 6 additional years to double that amount. We're now 18 years into your investment journey, and you're looking at $200,000. The mathematics of money is beginning to shift dramatically in your favor. At this stage, compound interest is really starting to demonstrate its power. Of that $200,000, you've personally contributed roughly $94,000 through your monthly investments. The other $106,000 represents pure investment growth. Your money has been quietly working behind the scenes, earning returns on previous returns, and suddenly those gains are becoming substantial. But here's the revelation that will fundamentally alter your understanding of wealth building. Even though you've only reached $200,000, you're actually halfway to becoming a millionaire. Not 1/5 of the way there, not 1/4 of the way there. Halfway. That's why I say hitting $100,000 is roughly 1/3 of the journey, not in dollars, but in difficulty. The first third is you pushing the snowball uphill. The next 2/3 is gravity and time doing the heavy lifting for you. The reason this works is that compound interest operates exponentially rather than linearly. Each dollar of growth generates its own future growth, creating an accelerating snowball effect over time. It's like pushing a massive boulder up a steep hill. The beginning requires enormous effort and feels almost impossible, but once you reach the summit and that boulder starts rolling downhill, momentum takes over completely. You might be wondering what happens during the final stretch toward that $1,000,000 goal. This is where things become truly exciting and, honestly, somewhat addictive to watch. During the next 18 years, as you continue making those same monthly contributions, compound interest becomes the dominant force driving your wealth creation. By the time you reach the 36-year mark, you've achieved that coveted 7-figure milestone. You've personally contributed approximately $187,000 over more than 3 decades, but your account balance shows over $1 million. That means more than 80% of your wealth came from compound growth rather than your own contributions. Think about what this means in practical terms. Your investments are now generating roughly $80,000 per year in returns alone. Remember how long it took you to accumulate your first $100,000? Now you're earning almost that much annually without any additional effort on your part. The beautiful aspect of this entire process is that it doesn't require you to live like a hermit or make dramatic sacrifices to your quality of life. We're discussing setting aside $400 per month, which for many people represents nothing more than being slightly more intentional about discretionary spending. This isn't about depriving yourself of everything enjoyable in life. It's about making small, consistent choices that compound over time into something truly remarkable. The person who understands this principle and takes action will build substantial wealth. The person who keeps waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect amount will likely spend their entire life wondering what could have been. The acceleration becomes even more dramatic as you move beyond that $1,000,000 mark. By year 45, you're looking at over $2 million and your investments are generating more than $160,000 annually in returns alone. At this point, your money is making more money each year than most people earn at their jobs. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This all sounds wonderful in theory, but what about inflation? What about market crashes? What about the fact that $1 million in 30 years won't buy what it buys today? Those are fair concerns, and that's exactly why we're talking about investing in productive assets, not just parking cash in a savings account and hoping for the best. Your goal is to grow faster than inflation, not pretend it doesn't exist. As for market crashes, yes, they happen regularly. Your account balance will decrease sometimes. In fact, it will probably decrease quite significantly during certain periods. But here's something fascinating that most people don't realize. Market downturns actually benefit you if you're consistently investing over decades. When prices drop, your monthly $400 contribution purchases more shares of your investments. When the market recovers, and historically it always has, those extra shares you accumulated during the downturn become incredibly valuable. It's like shopping for everything you need when the entire store goes on sale. Sure, it might feel uncomfortable to keep buying when prices are falling, but rational investors understand that temporary discomfort leads to long-term prosperity. The people who panic and sell during market downturns are essentially buying high and selling low, which is precisely the opposite of what successful investors do. They let fear override logic and end up sabotaging their own wealth-building efforts. But let's address that claim about not being able to find $400 per month. I hear this frequently, and while I understand that everyone's financial situation is unique, I also believe most people underestimate how much money flows through their hands without them really tracking where it goes. The average household spends over $600 per month on food, including both groceries and restaurant meals. If you could reduce that by just 25% through meal planning, cooking at home more often, and being strategic about dining out, you'd free up $150 monthly right there. That's already more than a third of your investment goal. Or consider transportation costs. The average car payment has now exceeded $700 per month. $700 for something that loses value the moment you drive it off the lot. If you could find a reliable used vehicle and cut that payment in half, you'd have enough to fund your investment account and still have money left over. I'm not suggesting you should survive on instant noodles or drive a vehicle held together with wishful thinking, but I am suggesting that most people have more flexibility in their budgets than they recognize. The problem is that we've become accustomed to certain lifestyle expectations that weren't necessarily based on sound financial reasoning. Here's something else that makes this entire process easier than you might expect. As your investment account grows, something psychological happens that actually accelerates your wealth building. You start noticing the monthly growth in your balance, and it becomes genuinely exciting to monitor. Instead of viewing investing as a sacrifice, you begin seeing it as the most rewarding thing you do with your money. This excitement motivates you to look for additional ways to boost your contributions. Maybe you decide to invest your tax refund instead of spending it on something you'll forget about in 6 months. Perhaps you redirect money from lifestyle inflation when you receive a raise at work. You might even start a side business specifically to generate more investment capital. When you see your money growing substantially each month without any additional effort from you, finding ways to accelerate that growth becomes a priority. This shift in mindset separates those who build significant wealth from those who remain trapped in the spending cycle indefinitely. Wealthy people think differently about money and time. They understand that every dollar has the potential to become multiple dollars through compound growth, and this understanding influences every financial decision they make. That expensive dinner isn't just costing them $100 tonight. It's potentially costing them several $100s in lost investment growth over the coming decades. Let's discuss why reaching that $100,000 milestone represents such a psychological game changer. There's something transformative that happens when you see a 6-figure balance in your investment account. Suddenly, the concept of becoming a millionaire shifts from fantasy to realistic possibility. Before you cross that 100,000 threshold, investment returns might generate a few $1,000s in a good year. Nice, but not exactly life-changing. Once you surpass that milestone, annual returns can easily exceed $10,000, and in exceptional years, you might see gains of $20,000 or more. These aren't theoretical numbers anymore. They're real money that could cover major expenses or fund significant life changes. This is when people begin to understand viscerally why financial experts say the first 100,000 is the hardest to accumulate. It's not just about the mathematics, though the math is certainly compelling. It's about developing the habits, mindset, and discipline that make long-term wealth building possible. The person who successfully saves and invests their first 100,000 has proven they can delay gratification, stick to a plan through market volatility, and prioritize long-term goals over immediate desires. These characteristics become increasingly valuable as investment balances grow larger and the stakes become higher. There's also the opportunity factor to consider. When you have substantial savings invested, you gain options that simply don't exist for people living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe a better job opportunity comes along, but it's with a smaller company that offers equity compensation instead of a guaranteed salary. Without financial reserves, most people can't take that risk. With a solid investment foundation, you can afford to bet on yourself. Perhaps you've always wanted to start a business, but you needed capital to get it off the ground. Or maybe an incredible real estate opportunity presents itself, but it requires a down payment that you don't have sitting in your checking account. These scenarios happen constantly, but they're only available to people who have built up financial resources through consistent saving and investing. The beautiful irony is that the same habits that got you to 100,000 make the journey to $1 million much more achievable. You've already developed the discipline to live below your means, the patience to weather market fluctuations, and the wisdom to prioritize long-term wealth over short-term consumption. Plus, as your income naturally increases throughout your career, those monthly contributions don't have to stay at $400 forever. The person who starts investing $400 monthly at age 25 might be contributing $800 or $1,200 monthly by age 40. The early habit of consistent investing creates the foundation for accelerated wealth building later in life. But here's something most financial advisors won't tell you, probably because it doesn't sell expensive investment products. The hardest part of this entire process isn't understanding compound interest or selecting the right investments. The hardest part is developing the discipline to stick with the plan when everything around you is demanding immediate gratification. We live in a culture that worships instant everything. Instant coffee, instant messaging, instant credit approval, instant streaming, instant food delivery. The idea of waiting 36 years for anything sounds absolutely barbaric to most people. They'd rather finance a luxury car today than drive a reliable used vehicle and invest the difference. They'd rather have the latest smartphone than contribute to their investment account and upgrade when their current phone actually stops working. This is why most people never build wealth despite living in the most prosperous society in human history. It's not because they don't earn enough money, though that's the excuse they prefer. It's because they've never learned to delay gratification long enough for compound interest to work its magic. The people who do build wealth aren't necessarily smarter or more disciplined than everyone else. They just have a different relationship with time and money. They understand that boring consistency beats exciting speculation almost every single time. While others are chasing the latest cryptocurrency or trying to time the market, successful investors are quietly adding to their index funds month after month, year after year. And let's be honest about something else. The math I've shown you assumes you never increase your contributions, never receive any employer matching in a retirement account, and never make any additional lump sum investments. In reality, most people's wealth building accelerates significantly beyond these conservative projections. Your employer might match 50 cents for every dollar you contribute to your company retirement plan. That's an instant 50% return before your money even gets invested. You might receive tax refunds, bonuses, or inheritance money that gets added to your investment accounts. You could start a side business that generates additional income specifically earmarked for wealth building. All of these factors work in your favor, but they're not included in our calculations because we wanted to show what's possible with just consistent monthly contributions. The reality is usually much better than the projections, not worse. Now, some of you might be wondering about the specific investments that make this whole strategy work. After all, earning 8% annually isn't guaranteed, and choosing the wrong investments could derail your entire plan. This is a valid concern, but it's also simpler to address than most people think. For the vast majority of investors, especially those just starting out, a simple index fund that tracks the total stock market is perfectly adequate. You're not trying to beat the market, you're trying to match it. And over long periods, matching the market has created more millionaires than any other investment strategy in history. The stock market has averaged over 10% annually for decades, even accounting for major crashes, recessions, and world wars. Could that change in the future? Absolutely. But betting against the continued growth of human innovation and productivity is a losing proposition that I wouldn't want to make. The key is avoiding the temptation to get fancy with your investment strategy. You don't need to pick individual stocks, chase hot sectors, or try to time market movements. In fact, doing any of these things will probably hurt your returns more than help them. The most successful investors are often the most boring ones. So there you have it. Reaching $100,000 isn't just another milestone on your journey to becoming a millionaire. It's actually mathematical proof that you're already 1/3 of the way there in terms of difficulty. The hardest, slowest, most frustrating part is behind you. From here, time and compounding do more and more of the work. Time and compound interest are working in your favor, but only if you give them the opportunity. Start investing consistently today because 36 years from now, you'll either be thanking yourself or wondering what could have been. And if you want someone to keep breaking this money math down calmly, step by step, make sure you're subscribed to Tim Invests so your future self doesn't have to figure all of this out alone.